Hello there. My name is Paul Blankenbaker. I'm one of the developers on the Network Security Toolkit project, and I'm going to be talking about one of the web interface pages we have called Active Connections today. The Active Connections page is designed to allow you to monitor the network connections that are currently occurring on your system. It's similar, I'd say, to TCP track or EtherApe somewhat. But this particular method allows you to do it from any web browser. And what I'm doing now is I'm using an actual Windows desktop and pulling up a browser on that Windows system to go monitor the network connections on a Network Security Toolkit system. To find the Active Connections page, you go to the Network menu, down to Monitors, and then select the Active Connections. When you first come into the page, it will pull up the connections that are currently going on the system. I'm going to pause it a second just so we can talk a little bit about what we're seeing initially here. This initial view is I'll say a table view of the connections which are occurring, and there's a local side and a remote side of each connection. For example, this one that's highlighted, you'll see it's from a 192.168.1.18 to a 192.168.1.33. This is a fairly low number of connections occurring right now because this NST system is not being used as a router or not providing other services and not actively being used at the moment. But we'll address that a little bit later and try and get some more activity going on. Below this table, you'll see this information header line and a closed folder. A lot of the times in our newer pages on the web interface, we've decided to try and minimize the amount of information you see immediately, but you can click on that folder to open it up and you'll get a lot more details and information about using the page, what kind of sources you can use to monitor. You can even come down and find technical notes on how the page was designed and some of the back-end scripts that are used to help support it. But for right now, since most people aren't going to read it anyway, I'm just going to close that up. Okay, so this initial table shows you a view of the connections going on. There's a set of columns, and each column has a header, and if you hover your mouse over it, you can find a tooltip will pop up and describe some information about that particular column. Above the table, you'll find your basic controls and status information. Right now there's a pause, unpause button to allow the activity to continue on polling to get updates, or if I take it out of pause mode, we'll see updates will start to come in. There's an options button. We'll go over that in a separate view, or a separate screencast actually, that has many different things you can adjust the behavior, including the source of where you're getting the connection information. Next to that, we have the mode, and we have three different modes of operation. There's what we're looking at right now is called a top mode, where we show like the top 20 or so connections that are most active. We also have a full mode. Let me switch back to top. In full mode, it will show you all the connections. For a really heavy loaded system, you probably don't want to do this when it's not paused, because if you look next to that mode, you'll see that we have 4 connections right now, and you'll see all 4 connections are shown down in the table below. If there have been 1,000 connections, you probably don't want to be updating that live in your browser. So we're going to go back to top mode for now. And since there's so few connections, it really doesn't make any difference. The final mode, and that's probably the most exciting one, is the map mode. And in the map mode, we go through these 2 columns of your local and remote connections. And for every IP address found, we'll try and look up a location, a geographic location, and plot it and show it to you on Google Maps. And we'll get to that in a moment here. First, we're going to finish off these little indicators. You'll notice right next to this mode, there's a little circular indicator that's right now it's toggling between green and gray. And that's just to show the activity of how often it's going out to the NST system and requesting updated information so it can update what's displayed to you. If you hover over that little icon, it will tell you, the different kind of states you might see it in. Generally, you just have to avoid seeing the red state, and if you do see that, that probably means you've got to go in and reconfigure your connection, and that would be under the options. Next to the status indicator, we have the connection count, and that's the number of rows in the full mode. How many connections are currently active on the system. And we'll see right now we've only got 3. It's dropping off a little bit. Next to that, we have a host count, and we have 2 different counts on that one. The first number is a total number of IPs if you were to look for unique IP addresses in all the rows currently shown. The next number is the unique IP addresses that have ever been seen since you started monitoring this page. So, if you've had this page up for an hour, you might only see 4 hosts active, but it might be 200 hosts or so have gone through the system over that time frame. Next to that are some located counts, and this just lets you know how many of the hosts we were able to successfully determine lat/lon coordinates for. How many we were able to actually show on a map were you in the map mode. And again, we'll see that right now we're 4 of 6, so for every host that we've gotten, we've been able to locate right now. And that's a little unique to this system because this system has been set up. Let me rephrase that. When you use the active connections for mapping, you're going to need to have your NST system set up so it can geolocate IP addresses. And out of the box, it's very simple to set up the NST system to locate public IP addresses. But to actually get it to locate private addresses like the ones we're seeing here, like this 192.168.1.18, you'll have to actually go in and edit the configuration file and set latitude and longitude locations for your network or individual host. We're not going to cover that in this screencast, but that's just to give you a heads up. Okay, so let me unpause this a second, and I'm going to drop into map mode now. And if you see right now, you'll see that there's like one host or one little icon on a Google map here being displayed. I can click on it for more information. And if I look at the address for this one, it's actually a broadcast address. So it's probably a UDP broadcast packet was being sent out by host 192.168.1.2. And over here we can see the ports that were involved in the broadcast packet. But at this moment, this is not that much traffic going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to a PuTTY window, which has a SSH connection to this NST system. And I'm going to clean my yum cache and then do a yum update. And this will run the yum package manager on the NST system. And when it starts up from a clean point, it will go out and check many of the Fedora mirror sites to determine which ones have the least latency or which ones are good sites to get the downloads from. And this will trigger a lot of connections for us on this system. So if you look back up here, we'll see before I press the enter key, you'll see we only have 2 active connections and 4 of 6 hosts plotted. Now I'll go ahead and start the yum update. Come back to this screen, and we should see these mirror sites start to drop in as the connections are established. And we'll see now that our connection table has jumped to over 120. We've got over 90 hosts located now on the map just from doing that one yum update. We haven't actually even downloaded any packages. We're simply going out and trying to find the fastest mirror sites. And these are some of the sites that have been hit to try and get some timing information on. Now, any of these sites, you can click on them and you'll see its location, its country, and almost more importantly, what other system connected to it. So from this one I can see that, it was host 192.168.1.33 made a connection to port 80, which would be the HTTP server out at this web server in, what is it? I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be able to pronounce it. Tunisia? In any case, I'll go ahead and click on that to jump back to the originator of the connection, this 192.168.1.3 box. And if I look at him, I can see that he has a zillion connections going on right now. And that's essentially all these connections were caused by that Yum update. All these web servers were being hit just to get some performance measurements. While we're looking at this little balloon help, there's some buttons on the top here. So if I want to know more about, say, this 192.168.1.3, I can click on the IP tools page, and that will open up this tab on the browser. And within the IP tools page, I can say, okay, 192.168.1.33, I can start running other types of tests against that IP. If I want to do a trace route, do an nmap on it, capture packets related to it, there's a bunch of different options you can do based on having an IP address with an NST system. We're not going to investigate that right now, but just to let you know it's there. Next to that, there's a center button. If I click that, that will reposition the map and center that icon. I don't know if you can see it right now, but some of our icons have disappeared and turned gray as these connections they're starting to clear out of the connection table, and we're going back to, I'll say, a quiet state. What else do we have here under these buttons? There is show lines. So let's go to this one over here. If I click on the show lines, for this one he only had, let me go back to him, he only had one other connection. But what it will do is it'll draw a line from that host to all the other hosts that it's connected to, so you can kind of visually get an idea of where he's going. That'll become a little more interesting as we start looking at other sources. I can hide the lines and we'll get rid of that. And for now, let's go to a couple other little map controls. These little resize indicators up near the top right of the map, there's a little minus and plus. If I hit the minus, it will refit the page such that the control area and the map fit perfectly within the space of your browser. If I hit the plus, it will make it so the map fills out your browser window. Now if you combine this with like your browser's full screen mode, it's kind of interesting in that you can put your browser in full screen mode, hit the plus, and essentially turn your entire desktop just into this map view that you can pan around and look at the connections as they're going on. It's just one of the kind of interesting views we have here on the active connections. In my case, let me get out of that. And I think I'm going to go ahead and pause the screencast at this point, and we'll see if we won't add another section that will address the issues of looking at other sources.